ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to Bunker Hill Community College. Most of you have no affiliation or relationship with the college. And I am the artist scholar in residence for 2018-2019. And we're in this room because the title of this exhibition is Revolutionary Moments. And the exhibition title really addresses itself to the fact that revolutions come in all forms. They are, in fact, moments when things about us as individuals change, and there are also sweeping social movements that affect many, many, many millions of people around the world. Tonight we have a very special guest, Seng Ty, who is the author of The Years of Zero, Coming of Age under the Khmer Rouge. And one of the things that's significant about this interview is that we're going to take a slightly different approach, because clearly it's about war and the recollections and experiences of war. But in fact, there are almost 25 million people in the world right now who are refugees. And half of those are under 18. And the past century was, we're told, the bloodiest of any century in the history of humanity. And so one of the things I'd like to focus on this evening is what I call spiritual resilience. That this idea of war, as many of us experience it, directly and indirectly, is probably a really bad idea that we haven't visited and reflected on as a way of solving our problems. Because no good comes from it except the people who make money off of war. And the devastation that it affects communities and nations is extraordinary. There are 3 countries in the world where most of the refugees in the world are now coming from. Can any of you guess where those 3 countries are? Nope, refugees, yes, but not the most. Syria. Give you a hint. One starts with an A. Nope. There's been a war there for decades and decades. Afghanistan. And the third one, an S word, South Sudan. I won't work you too hard. So these are 3 countries where most of the refugees in the world live. And if we think back about our history as human beings, there's almost never been a period of time when there hasn't been at least 70 wars by my count going on simultaneously, some of them at scale, some of them smaller, around the world. So I want to focus on not so much war, because we know what war does. But I want to focus on the kinds of spiritual resilience that Seng Ty talks about in his book, especially for those of you who have read it. So he's here tonight to talk to us. We want to welcome him, and let's give him a round of applause to welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah.
In the epilogue of your book, you refer to yourself as a child of the revolution. And in your Time magazine interview, you share the wisdom of your parents, which was, quote, "The power of revenge isn't the art of killing, but the art of goodness." What did you mean by that?
I remember my mother before she passed away. She's always reminds me that revenge doesn't mean to go back and kill the Khmer Rouge, doesn't mean using violence. The revenge is mean to get a good education in yourself, because my mother value education as the most important things. Mm-hmm. That she told me that the Khmer Rouge can take anything away from you, but the Khmer Rouge cannot take your education from you. So that inspired me to do whatever I can to please my mother. Last words that she passed it on to me.
Can you tell us a little bit, the title, it's The Years of Zero. What are the years of zero?
I've been come up with the different titles, and finally I decided to title my book The Years of Zero. That means during those Khmer Rouge between 1975 to 1979, nothing happening in Cambodia. Everything was completely silent. There's no market, there's no school for me to go, there's no playground for me to play, there's no hospital for me to go when I get sick. Nothing happening in Cambodia. And I was not allowed to communicate or talk to my family or write a letter to my brothers who live in France. Nothing happening in Cambodia. Everyone had to be dressed in black uniform and work in the rice fields and eat the same food and work in the same field. That's nothing happening during that time. And the Khmer Rouge been so good to keep the international community not to come in to find out what's happening. And the only that they allow was the Chinese to come in to see what's happening in Cambodia.
Now, there was a lot of things that are going on in the world during the time that the Vietnam War is going on. And the Vietnam War, as we all know, is brought to Cambodia. It's part of what happens in terms of history. And can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Cambodian government and people, particularly once the French come? Because Cambodia becomes independent in 1954.
Yes.
Before that, it's a French protectorate. So I know there was one quote that I really enjoyed where you said, on the one hand, the only good thing the French left us was the recipe for baguettes.
Yes. Yes.
And then in the next sentence you say, but the French turned the Cambodian people into their servants.
Yes.
What were those feelings about? What was that experience like?
You know, the French came in, and you know at that time, the French introduced a school, mostly the Cambodian. Even my father, who been educated in France and speak French, and my grandmother, who worked for the French businesses, people, and even the school, they introduced everything. The education is all in the French curriculum. Yeah, and the French came in, and that's why the Sihanouk, which is the Cambodian king, tried to fight to get the independence, to get the French out. Yeah. So that's after that, and then that time was the Sihanouk was the head of state. Controlling the country,
right.
and since the Vietnam War started, and everything is Cambodian, it's a totally different country, and the war in Vietnam spilled into Cambodia, and also the United States was supporting one of the general government Cambodians. High ranks in Cambodia to overthrow the Sihanouk so that they can try to help the wars in
Right.
Vietnam.
So the U.S. government was doing in Cambodia what it was doing in a number of other countries.
Yes.
Everybody should be aware of this. This is kind of our MO, our modus operandi as a nation, and I think it's something that eventually we're going to have to face. It's just another form of colonialism, I think, imperialism. The complicated, the situation.
Very complicated, and the North Vietnamese, which is try to associate with the Cambodian king so that they can use the trio to fight the South Vietnamese, which is that affect the Americans.
Right.
And that's why the time Sinuk's allowed that. That's why the U.S. Tried to get up a Sihanouk and install a new government.
Right.
And in 1968, which is President Richard Nixon decided to secretly bomb Cambodia
Right.
to destroy Viet Cong.
Right.
But it didn't end up killing the Viet Cong. It was affected, mostly killed the civilians of
Yes.
Cambodian.
Yes.
And that time, that's how the Khmer Rouge started, fuel it up and getting stronger and stronger.
Now, one of the really strong themes involving the takeover by the Khmer Rouge is this kind of influence of Maoist ideology and the Cultural Revolution, which is also going on between 66 and 76 in China. And you know, you talk a lot about who the Khmer Rouge are, that they're peasants with guns, that they're mostly young people with AK-47s, and that the way in which they're trained is mostly to just hate. And it seems like, you know, I want you to talk a little bit about this idea of ethnic hatred, because it seemed like Khmer Rouge were indoctrinated to hate everything and everybody. They hated Buddhist monks, they hated intellectuals, they hated the Chinese. What was this, you know, ethnic hatred? It was everywhere.
The Khmer Rouge leaders have been very, very good with try to point out, let's say, you look at it, you poor, look at what happened to the rich people, because they took off from you. That's why you're poor. And look at the educated people. What happened? That's why you work in the rice field all your life, because of the educated people. So they fuel all these people to hate the rich and the educated, and also they try to fuel these people to hate the Western way of living, because that's how you are poor. That's how you not educated, because of those the Western way of life is took over your life.
But you didn't end up hating.
I did not at the time. The Khmer Rouge been trying to brainwash any young people to take guns, to take lives, and it's just that time. The only that I was not allowed. If I decided to take harm to someone, the Khmer Rouge would promote me to become a leader.
Yeah.
But at the time, when I think about what happened to my mother, who taught me in the early age, by going to the temple, by become a good person, by respect all the people, respect all different people, and that's time spending a good quality time with my parents, and it's helped me during the Khmer Rouge, and that's why the Khmer Rouge would not take my soul, would not allow to brainwash me to take others people's life, or to hate the other people.
Yeah, it's interesting because your family represented then what the Khmer Rouge hated.
Correct.
Your family was educated. Your family was upper class.
Yes.
Your brothers and sisters were being educated.
Yes.
Your elder brother outside of the country in France.
Yes. I mean, even though my mother never had any schooling in Cambodia, and especially in the Cambodian women in those old days, not many Cambodian women who's well educated.
Right.
But my mother never had any schooling, but she's inspire all her children have to get a good education. That's why every one of us have to be in school. That's why she put all my oldest brothers to be able to get a full scholarship to go to study in France. And in Cambodia, in that time, it's very, very special. if you can put your kid into the to go abroad to study.
To abroad to
Yeah.
study. Yeah.
Yes.
Tell us about the lucky tea kettle.
When I talk about that tea kettle, it just, I am feel so sad that I have to let it behind. But during those times, the tea kettle is the one that saved my life,
Yes.
and the one that I depend on
Yes.
a lot,
Yes.
and the one that I can talk to, I can depend on, and everything that I survived in that tea kettle.
Right.
And as you read the book, that everything I cook in there, and I could not, now that you look back at it, how come at that time the Khmer Rouge didn't open the tea kettle and look for that? It's just something that I know at that time I feel the spirit of my mother just around me, just
Right.
protect me during those.
Right. You were, I think we call a scrappy little kid in the middle of war. And you stole food a lot to stay alive. And you survived when a lot of other people didn't. And, you know, one of the things you say in the book is that in the hut that you were in with about maybe 30 other people, that you survived because you didn't care if you died as long as your belly was full.
Yes.
What does that tell us about that?
At the time, you put your fear behind you because that time was so hungry. Anything that you could do just to feed yourself, anything that I could find to eat to survive the next day. And that time, it doesn't matter the Khmer Rouge come and take me or beat me or torture me. Your fear is no longer with me. The only that you care, that you want, that you search for is try to get food to eat at that time. And I was not afraid to go out, sneak at night time, trying to stealing food, just to fill my stomach so that the next day I can go to work for the Khmer Rouge.
Right. I imagine that, you know, hunger is something that many of us perhaps have not experienced. The kind of hunger that's a daily hunger that follows you everywhere, and it's a basic drive.
It's just a basic drive. You rather to have the Khmer Rouge torture you while you're full,
Right.
instead of you die of
Yeah.
starvation. Yeah.
But you were very creative. I mean, you would sneak off places, and if you read the book, he'd sneak off places at night when he knew that it was dangerous. And he'd
I knew
find
that
food.
it's dangerous. Yeah.
He'd find food.
Yeah. It's like during the daytime, you kind of try to articulate where the food are and where things are. And that when it's nighttime, when the Khmer Rouge kind of slow down, watching us, I'm just sneak it out. Even though you're stepping on the dead bodies on the way to the fields, you was not fear. You was not afraid at all. Because your mind is just want to get food, come back.
Yes.
And when I received those food, I was not allowed to eat freely. You have to eat very quietly.
Right, of course. Or hide it under the
yes.
weeds in
Yes,
your
yes.
lucky tea kettle.
Yes.
Right, right. You had a young Khmer Rouge friend who taught you how, before he died, he taught you how to make animals with clay. And then you also had your brother San's diary that you wrote in. And it kind of captured my imagination because those are two creative sort of instincts, this drive to make things with your hands. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of creativity, which also goes into writing a book like this?
During the times, you never, the only that you can do just to play the clays, and at the time I was trying to make friends with the Khmer Rouge or the Khmer Rouge children, so that and they taught me how to do all this making animal, from the clays. So it's just and try to survive, learn how to plant things, learn how to farm at the time, and because they think that I'm coming from the very city type of lifestyle,
Right.
and especially when I look like coming from a wealthy, rich family. So at the time, I was be able to interact and share some of my my experience, and then they shared that whatever how to make clays at that time. And at the times, during one of the toughest years when the Khmer Rouge did so many killings in that years, and I was so, it feels so empty at the time, and I would not allow to talk to any other kids around me, and the only that I could do is just look at the stars and then try to communicate through the star by myself. And at that time, I said, it doesn't matter how long, and it doesn't matter where, if I able to survive, I want to share this story. And that time, my brothers the Khmer Rouge took him away, who left some diarrhea for me at that house.
Yeah.
And I was not allowed to, if the Khmer Rouge knew that I was be able to read or know what's happening, have a diarrhea, that would be, the Khmer Rouge would be killed.
Right. Yeah. So there's this very common thread in which, people during this particular war are put in categories: who can read, who can't, who can write, who can't. And if you can do certain things, that means you're a part of the contemptible, wealthy class oppressor kind of thing. And
it's especially for me, it's hard to survive because the Khmer Rouge was always keep an eye on me all the time, on my family all the time, because the way our skin, our features, they don't think that we are coming from living in the countryside.
The countryside. Yeah. So you're paler complexion.
Exactly.
You can't do anything about that, but you can pretend you can't read.
You can,
and that you can't write.
And then you pretend that you are collecting cans, collecting junk for a living. That possible that try to convince the Khmer Rouge that I am part of yours.
Right. And that's another part of closer to the end when there is this the rescue. You remain a scrappy little kid in the city trying to survive with various businesses, and some of them collapse and you find something else, and you are very resourceful. I hate living in the orphanage. And I had enough of almost 4 years living in the Khmer Rouge camp. Right.
And after the Khmer Rouge, I was be able to reunite my brother and two sisters, and they tried to push me to go to live in the orphanage in the capital city, and I hate it because they were so violent in there, and you receive only a small portion of rice soup once, twice a day. And I said, this is not what I wanted. I wanted to be out there and whatever I can survive on my own. So that's why I decided to live on the street, wandering around, working just to survive.
It was diametrically opposed to the way that you were raised, though. In a loving home where there was plenty of food and plenty of attention from siblings and all of that stuff, to suddenly becoming a street kid after you left the camps. So, I think that aspect of your personality is intriguing, and it kind of exemplifies the spiritual resilience that I'm talking about, that you say come from your home training.
Yes. And you wandering around and always thinking about my mother's words, she said, when the country is back to normal, you have to go to school, get education, because education, it's you have that's a goal that you never have in yourself. No one can get away, can take away from you. When I heard that, my mother told me that I was wondering that why I am living on the street. I saw many other kids that have family, that they had to go, that they went to school.
Mm-hmm.
And I reflected to myself, I said, why I'm sleeping on the street? So once you realize that, and plus, you was hope to be able to reunite it
Mm-hmm.
with my oldest brother,
Mm-hmm.
that I was hoping to reconnect it with him who live in France.
In France, right?
Yeah.
Because he was the eldest and he had
He
been
was-
sent off to study.
Yes,
When the war broke out, he was not there initially, right?
correct. And once I learned that he's one of them, that the Khmer Rouge invited to come to Cambodia and executed in one of the Khmer Rouge secret prison in Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
At the time when I saw a picture, when I saw his name, it's like you feel like so empty.
Mm.
There's nothing compared.
Mm.
That you usually have so many families, food, and now I'm here on the street, and my oldest brother that I was hoping to depend on.
Mm-hmm. It's gone,
Yep.
yeah. 1 out of 4 Cambodians were killed in a war that was designed by Pol Pot, just as good as Hitler. I mean, just as well as colonialism in most of the nations in the world. I mean, these were policies and practices. It wasn't like people just decided to invade. These were strategic plans that were laid out to take over nations and create anarchy and chaos, in the midst of that.
I remember that night, I had such a wonderful dream of having food. All my family was together. Once I woke up, I was on the street, and that moment, I had to decide that I have to leave the country.
Mm. Enough is enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that time, I was about this age, but it's about 14.
Mm.
And I said, if I survive, try to find a better life somewhere out,
Mm-hmm.
if I got through that,
Mm-hmm.
and I will find a better future on my own.
Mm-hmm.
If I decided to stay in Cambodia at that time, I don't think I would be able
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I can see that.
So that's why I determine myself that I have to leave Cambodia. And I remember hopping on the train,
Mm-hmm.
went back to where the Khmer Rouge brought me in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It was so painful
Mm.
to go back to that part of the country.
Right, right. I don't actually want to go back to the period when you were in the camps, but I do want to talk a little bit about human nature, because for as much brutality as there was, we can always rely on human nature in any given situation. There were some kind people. For example, you and your parents, you were all, when you first went through the forced removal, your father was not a farmer, but some of the local people taught them how to farm.
Yes.
How to plant rice. And some of the children, as you mentioned, taught you how to play with what you have,
Yes.
in a sense. What do you think about that? I mean, that part of human nature I've always found fascinating, because oftentimes in the worst times, the worst or best comes out of people. But there were some nice people in the story.
Yeah, there was at the beginning, the era of the Khmer Rouge. I was so surprised to see the interaction between my father and with the Khmer Rouge in that village, because it seemed that I thought all the Khmer Rouge was all evil.
Right.
Everyone was just very much the same. But this family was so kind to my family, and I remember that I was so afraid at the time that that this family might be able to use his tactic to be friend, but at the end might take my family away or something. Yeah. So at the time, but some reason that Khmer Rouge family would kind of build relationship, build trust with my father.
Right.
That's why my father tried to revive one of his son that who bitten by the snake, but at the time was in a remote area that he could not access to any medical to help. Yeah.
Now, one of the things that happens is the Khmer Rouge Tribunal in 2001, decades after the war. And, you know, I remember being in South Africa myself when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was run in 1996. And I was in Liberia when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission there in 2011. And I remember the yearning that people have for some sort of punishment, some sort of reconciling with all the horrible things that had happened. Do you feel as though the Khmer Rouge Tribunal did that for the Cambodian people? Did it do it for you? I mean,
it took a long time.
Yeah.
For me, it doesn't. I want to see the tribunal, those Khmer Rouge leaders. It doesn't matter how long. It doesn't matter how old are they. But I want this tribunal to show the younger generation that doesn't matter how long, doesn't matter how old you. If you commit crime, you must be bringing to justice.
Okay.
And I knew that many of those Khmer Rouge leaders that who were responsible for those time, they never admitted that they did it. They always blamed to somebody else.
Oh yeah.
And that's something that really struck me. That really I want the truth of what's happening during that time, because you are the one who are changing all this society into the year of zero.
You're responsible,
Yep,
so
exactly.
you should be accountable.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I was so sad to see all those Khmer Rouge leaders that are dying in their old age.
Right.
And just only last year, that one of them was brought up and put in jails, and the rest of those Khmer Rouge top leaders die of their old age.
Right.
And they never admitted that what they done it to the Cambodian people. And now it's now it's you know, the history kind of fading away because of not being educated in the Cambodian school.
Right.
The government not even really brought it up to educate the young people.
Right. It kind of,
because it's very political.
yeah, it's very interesting when you sort of hold it up against Germany, and because the German people are trying to keep alive what happened in the Holocaust to the Jewish people, because they're never forget, so that we never repeat this, and we are accountable for our own history. So it's, unfortunate that that many Cambodian people never got the sort of justice that they deserved.
Cambodian genocide, one of the largest genocide in the world history.
Yeah.
And not many people knew what's happening.
Yeah.
There's this only that came out, the movies called Killing Fields.
Yes.
Yeah, that came out in 1984.
Mm-hmm.
That many people who knew what's happening in Cambodia.
Right, right. I mean, it's also true that, you know, succeeding generations who haven't experienced war directly don't have the same sort of feelings because they didn't experience it, and so they don't sometimes know how to communicate and talk about it because it's difficult to talk about brutality and war. And yet, you know, one of the things I've noticed when I was still teaching at Northeastern, every year I would have increasing numbers of students who had either just come from a country where there was war or they'd just come from a refugee camp and, you know, were part of this experience. What do you think about this sort of serial practice we have of war and conflict? Because I remember in the book you also talked about how your family used to sort of gather around to listen to Voice of America. Yes. And that the Khmer Rouge actually used the radio to suggest that the Chinese Cambodians be victimized. I mean, they tried to exact a kind of genocide on the Chinese Cambodians first. And it also reminded me of what the Hutus had done to the Tutsis in Rwanda. You know, use the radio to tell everybody to go ethnically cleanse this other ethnic group. And where does this come from in us as human beings? How do we dig deep into ourselves to try to rethink about how people treat one another across these differences? I mean, I know it's a big question and you don't have all the answers, but you must have been thinking about it during this experience that you had as a young child, because you were told by your father very clearly that this was wrong, that what was happening was wrong.
You know, at that times when my father was, because we don't have TV in those times, the only that we could hear was from the radio, and also that, and my father been very honest to whatever he learned it from his work, or he was usually during the dinner time he tried to educate it to us, to all the children, what is right and what is wrong, and what is make sense and what does not make sense. And that's at that time we try to grab it from our parents that who been very educated to all of us. And now when when I'm adult and have my own children, I would do it the same to my own kids, that what's happening around the world today, and what's happening around in this country today. Yeah, try to make sense of that.
Which leads me to my next question. You counsel kids in a middle school,
yes,
and a number of those kids are Cambodian children.
Yes, correct.
Does the war come up? How do children respond to it? Did they know about it? Are they being educated about it? Or have they been Americanized?
Most of them, they are new generations, and they knew nothing what happening to their parents and their grandparents. And I know even my generation who came from the war, and many of my friends, many of people that I know in my community, many of them, they don't want to talk about it because it's so hard to. They say that the wound has been healed, but don't try to
reopen the wound.
Reopen it up. Yeah. So that's why many of my younger generation, they knew nothing.
Right.
Even those younger generation in Cambodia knew nothing what's happening. Even they live in Cambodia, they knew very little what's happening.
Right. Did it feel good to get the book finished?
First
get it out?
I just want to. I never thought that I would write the book, and because I was written by Roger Rosenblatt in the Time magazine. I did a lot of talking in the past
Right.
with Donald Hughes show and
Interviews, yeah.
interviews, and when I go out to the publics and learn about other genocide, and not many people knew what's happening,
Right.
and what happened in Cambodia. I said, this is something that I want to share to the people that
Right.
who knew very little what's happening, because genocide could happen anywhere and anytime around here or around the world. Yeah. So that's why I decided to spend time to try to get all these memories out, so that I can pass it on to my kids and to the new generation of Cambodians, and to learn from it, because not many books are written
Right.
in this similar subject. So I believe there's only one that came out about 8 years ago. Was First They Killed My Father.
Yes. Right. I'm going to do something unusual now and open up the floor. Are there any questions that any of you ladies and gentlemen
Sure.
would like to ask Seng, either about his work now?
Yeah, I think.
Is that a hand I saw over here? Yes, ma'am.
Out of all your characteristics that make your personality, which one is your favorite, and which one do you think helped you during the time of the Khmer Rouge?
I was really at the time. I was very close to my mother a lot. When I'm the youngest one of 11. You could imagine 11 kids in the family, and I was the baby one. And everywhere I just followed my mother, and that's why during the Khmer Rouge I was so. It's no one to talk. There's only that my mother that I can very attach with. That's why I stress a lot talking about her, because she's one of my angel to. I knew at that time when you was like 7 and 8 years old, but my mother told me that when she's not there, but her spirit will be overwatch me. And at the time, you couldn't understand what it was. And even those that she tried to inspire me to keep survive. But at the time, I said what it meant. And when my mother passed away, and I feel that her spirit and it's just there for me. Every time but I got being tortured or beat, I feel like I was there with her. So that's what at the time I feel so comfortable to be with her, and I knew that at some reason, as I mentioned earlier, that it doesn't matter. I would be able. The Khmer Rouge put the strict is so, put the rule is even tougher. I was be able to get out stealing food.
Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you still feel your mother's presence now?
I feel not as quite as before, and I know when I first came to Amherst in June 16, 1982, and it felt like I was born again. And it feel like when I having dinner with my new family, I feel like this is the dream that I had before that, before I left Cambodia, and this is a real one. And then a few weeks later, I had a dream that my real mother said that now you are safe. Now you're in a good hand, and now you are on your own. And that after that, I had less and less of dream of her, and I have to move forward on my new family, my new life. Yeah.
So she guided you to your next family.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when you read this article, and this is how the article that captured my American mother, that brought me to United States, and not only me, she brought about 15 other Cambodian orphans to sell in Western Massachusetts because of the article that she read. Yeah.
Right. You know, the great irony of that and a lot of other wars that America's been involved in, to the extent that we've actually participated in these wars. You know, we've instigated these wars in a number of other countries and continents, and yet many people will then come here as refugees from those countries. And there's not, I'm not making a judgment about that. I'm sure someone will, but I'm not. But it's a beautiful irony that so many people from so many countries that have been devastated by war have ended up here. And it's as if each new group of people from a different part of the world make America anew again. Bringing their traditions, their ways of being, and sort of begin to experiment and expand what it means to be an American. Because there are a lot of things in America that are not right. There's a lot of things in America that are really bad. And as a person who's part Native American, there've been 500 years of fighting between the American government and my people about everything from land rights to the missing and murdered Native American women, and just there's so many things. And so I guess I want to ask you, what is it about this country that keeps the dream alive for you?
When you're in a refugee camp, you dream, you wish to have a beautiful family, you wish to have a safe place to live, a place to play, and a school to go. And once I remember the minute I land in San Francisco, I looked from the above, from the plane, and saw that those buildings, and here this is the United States. Welcome to America. And that moment, I try to put my past away, and that now I am in this. And at the time I was so anxious, who's I'm going to be living with, and where I'm going to be end up.
Right.
And my question to myself is, am I going to be living in the orphanage again? Because at that time they didn't tell me the family I'm going to be living with. And but in my mind, telling me that it doesn't matter where you're going to be end up, I have to go to get to school. That's all in my mind all the time. And it doesn't matter how difficult it is, I have to get good to go to school, get a good education, because that's what my mother brought me up to this, helped me to guide me to get this far.
Right.
And I remember it was June 16, 1982, when I landed in Hartford, Connecticut. And here we go. I was introduced by an American family with all blonde hair, tall, and I didn't speak any a word of English. I was so shocked to see, this is my new family. And I couldn't communicate with them. I couldn't, tell. Only I knew was yes and no.
Right.
And in the same time was so excited. At the same time was so nervous. Am I gonna be fit in this family, where I came from, which is a very, came from a very violent country
Right.
and hatred, and now this family was smiling at you and welcome open arm to me, and also, they drove by UMass Amherst,
Yeah.
and I was so excited. It's like, wow, I cannot imagine. Is this like a dream for me? I'm coming to live in this country. And I was so excited. And I think it was at night time at the time. And I said, wow, this is the dream came true. I'm coming to live in one of those high-rise buildings with all those lights. UMass Amherst is almost like a city.
Yeah.
And as soon that my mother passed by those UMass into her house in a small street, which is a dark, have a mountain behind, I was so shocked. I said, this is not what I want to come to the United States.
You're back in the countryside
I'm
again.
back into
The countries, the
working
peasants,
the
where the
rice field
peasants
again.
live. Yeah.
Am I? It's your mind is going
Yeah.
through all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah. The morning I woke up, with cow in front, I said, this is it. I am back to the rice field again. So that's kind of started coming back. But soon that I tried to build a relationship with my parents
Right.
and try to live a normal way of this. This is the family that I've been wanted. I have to do good. I have to do whatever I can, not to give a lot of problem to this family or not to do anything. I just wanted to be a good person as much as I could be in this new family.
Have you mentioned Buddhism a little bit in the book here and there. Have your Buddhist values influenced your life then and now still?
I've been fortunate that my American parents really open-minded and really allow me to go to the temple. And I remember when first year I arrived here, I was so lonely and it's a homesick, and it's just that you need to someone to talk. So my parents was be able to drive me for 2 hours from Amherst to Rhode Island to the temple there, just to be a part of that. And that's they want me to continue to go to the temple and preserve the culture and language. So that's helped me a lot. Even though I still go to church with them, but they allow me to. They was be able to take me to the temple.
Anyone else? Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
You haven't shut out your past, I know that for sure, but you've acknowledged that it happens and it made you who you are today. How have you used this to adapt to America? Like, how have you used your past to not bring you down while you were doing whatever it was you were doing here, but lift you?
Yeah, good question. I've been really, when you gone through, witnessed so many death and violence and been tortured, and I don't use my anger as a part of to resolve, because I know that, let's say, I'm not sure, one of my friends, we did a lot of things together, good in the communities here and also in Cambodia. His name is Chon Parn, and he was in the 60 Minutes with me a while ago. And he came to Western Mass. He came as an orphan with me. And I didn't know what he'd done in the past. And when I learned that he's one of the Khmer Rouge, and I kind of hold on to myself that now I don't use anger to revenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to be a very good friend with him so that I can try to understand him and why the Khmer Rouge should be able to convince him
Right.
to take life.
Right.
And why not me?
Right.
And I'm trying to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And now that, when you're so young, you can be so brainwashed so easily.
Mm.
And he came from a very, peasant family, and I'm coming from a different family, so that's why. But at the end, we're walking in the same path. We're doing good things for. Then I learned how to accept, and then now he start to open up a lot.
Mm.
Yeah, before I couldn't get anything, because when you live in the orphanage, some other kid, the rumor said that, oh, you did some killing, and then it's a lot of things in his mind.
Right.
Yeah, and that's how I learned to understand. And now that I am 50, everyone that who gone through that at all has PTSD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even me, I do have it.
Sure. Yes.
When I hear the train at night near my house, I woke up in the middle of the night, just feel like that I was there again.
Mm.
And every time I heard that train, remember the day that I was there. And that's why I try to keep positive myself, keep myself actively in the communities. And I even now I still play music. I continue to gather with my orphan friends, and we kind of play.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of healing, and we do a lot of activities. We do a lot of things together.
Mm-hmm.
So if I try to stop and then go back there, that's get me even more worse. Yeah. So that's why I'm continue keep going, and that's why many older generation in my community now that have a lot of issues, a lot of problems that they could not cope while and up drinking and up depressed. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, related to your question is what I had mentioned earlier, and that is the idea of child soldiers and the trauma that war creates affects not only the victims of the war, but the child soldiers themselves become victims. Yes. Because they're recruited, oftentimes drugged and abused into, carrying AK-47s and killing people, sometimes their own family. And this is not peculiar to Cambodia. This has happened in every country of the world. And you all know who Nelson Mandela is, and his wife, Graca Machel, has become very famous in the United Nations for taking it as her special project, trying to inform people about the dark side of war, but particularly its effects on child soldiers and children, and the reorientation that has to go on once you get those children out of war. And it sounds very much like this is what you're trying to do with your friend, that you are able to acknowledge with him that he was as much a victim as you were. He was brainwashed.
Exactly.
But then your question, and comment is also about human nature, and that is, why weren't you brainwashed? So what is it about us as individuals? We are individuals, all of us. And you never know, in difficult moments, who's gonna give in and who's got enough strength to stand on their own.
And it's really so easy at the time. Let's say if I decided to take it in, be one of the Khmer Rouge, it's very, very easy. If you take someone's life, then it means that you are pure Angkar's children. You are now, you are the engine of the Angkar, of the Khmer Rouge leader. So now you can do anything you want. So when you're in that power, you can take others' lives. And for me, at the time, I decided this is completely wrong, whatever they did. And my mother did not teach me to do this. And I do not being brainwashed by those people. So if they, at that time, I committed to myself, if the Khmer Rouge give me a choice to either you take some people's life and they become a leader, or you want to take my life, I rather they would take my life, so that my pain would be gone. So that I don't have to be painful to suffer other people's life. So that's my commitment at that time, if the Khmer Rouge decide to do that to me. And that's why when I see what's happening around the world today, when I see young people being, brainwashed, joining, ISIS or joining terrorism, it's just, just very easily to go into that boot.
Right. But the healing piece is also important too, the post-traumatic stress syndrome that everyone has who's associated with any kind of war at any point. And sometimes suppressing it is not healthy. You have to deal with it.
And this story is just to enlighten some others. I have some of my kids is coming from a very tough situation, that after they read the book, and I asked them, what do you think? I knew that you live in this country, you have, even though you're coming from a difficult situation, but there's so many people out there to care about you, to get help. Even those that you're coming from a different situation, you have a beautiful school to go. And if you can get through that you're exiting your life for better. And at the time, I did not have that. You cry for help, no one could hear you. Everything I have to do all alone. So that if I can, even those I came in the early 90s, starting with 9th grade. I was so struggled. You have only 2 or 3 years of schooling in Cambodia, now you put it in 9th grade. And it feels like you're sitting in the jungle, not knowing anything.
Right.
And I knew that myself, that I look around me, all American students who speak well, who can do well. I look at them, I said, someday, it's like, feel like I'm a turtle, I walk slowly, but someday I will reach that goal.
The tortoise and the hare.
Yes. and that's how I determined myself that I can do it. So that try to use that, if I can do it, they can do it too. It's kind of reward for me. I'm working in the low public school for, this is my 25th years.
Congratulations.
And, thank you. Yeah. And when the kids read this, came to me that how they appreciated the school, the parents, learn their history. It's kind of feel a reward. I have so many letters that the kids wrote to me, not just only some other schools in around the area, that the book helped them to open their eyes. And it's not just I'm doing only counseling and academic, but I'm trying to get them to understand that million other children around the world that did not have that chance, and then you have the chance to do it.
Right.
And
not to take for granted what you have. Right.
How about your own children? Because I remember you just mentioned a while ago that your children are actually reading the book in school. What do they think of it? What have they told?
My older son, he's now in the 7th grade. He read the book and he start asking a lot of questions, and he's starting to appreciate where I came from and appreciate the Cambodian communities, and also when they was younger, they was asking me why they have so many grandparents, why their grandparents is so different from them. And it's so hard for me at the beginning to explain it to them.
Right.
Yeah. So, and then that's how when they start reading the book, they kind of understand.
So the importance of reading. I mean, you know, we have the Harry Potter generation in here, I think, probably. And the Harry Potter generation was reintroduced to the beautiful art of reading successfully, you know, several books in the series. And I think reading a book is not something that is the first thing that a lot of American kids are going to do in the 21st century. You know, they're going to look at their phone and play on their tablet or, you know, play video games. And so the world of books and reading is an important way to get in touch with so much depth in terms of what it means to be a human being. I mean, you really have to kind of stop when you read your book and dive in the deep end of the pool of your experience, because it's from the point of view of a child. So it's not terribly sophisticated, you know, you're not dealing with a lot of complex language. We're looking through the vision of a child who's under 15 this entire.
I mean, I got so many stories that one of the person who wrote me an email, she's bought the book for her husband for on a vacation. And instead that while the vacation was, her husband was in tears. I said, I am sorry. I didn't need your vacation.
Not an appropriate book for when you're trying to relax.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I got so many positive notes from all ages, from middle school to high schools. I'm not a writer. I just want to share this story to, to the people who, knew what happened.
It's your legacy. Yeah. I mean, your children are too, but this book is your legacy about your family history. I mean, if your children want to know about their grandparents, they get to see their blood grandparents through your eyes.
How appreciate my American families who completely, totally different from my world.
Right.
And be able to adopt me, to come into their open arm, to welcome me to their family, from a stranger boy from outside, third world country. And it's beyond, I imagine that, someone would be able to do that. And not just only me, but brought in so many other orphans to the other families as well. So we still contact. My American mother come to visit me, and then I go to visit them.
There's Americans, and then there's the American government. And, fortunately, when you get to know Americans as people, we can be pretty nice.
Definitely, yes. Yes, and the kindness, and as you might know, that a lot of refugees came to the United States in the early 80s.
Right. Yeah.
And the kindness of the American people that open arms to, the refugees. And as I am the refugee, I want to do good for, not to disappoint it, just want to be better and understand. Yeah.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say before we
close first up? Of all, I would like to thank you for choosing my memoir. And it's really, I was shocked at the beginnings when I heard that your school opened arm to this book.
Oh, yeah.
And this history.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you so much, and
my pleasure.
And anything that I would be happy to.
My pleasure. I mean, I think it's our pleasure to have you here tonight and to hear your story through the book. And if we haven't read the book, I'm sure we will read the book. It's an easy read. I mean, in the sense that, it's painful and difficult and awkward, but it's an easy read and informative. Yeah. And I think that what you don't know when you're reading the book, you can Google, some of the history of what actually is going on in the 1960s and 70s and 80s in the United States. Those of you who are younger, it was a tumultuous time period, and there were many people from many countries coming to the U.S. as refugees.
Yeah. And one last thing that a few years ago I went to New York. I met with Roger Rosenblatt, who wrote a Time article, and also I went to, it was kind of a small reunion with Roger Rosenblatt and Dr. Neil Boothby, who's a professor at Columbia University. And also Roger Rosenblatt passed along this bag to me that he's been keeping in his office for a number of years.
Oh, nice.
And this is I did this in the refugee camps, and as I mentioned, is in the book cover. I mean, the photo there. I always loved drawing an airplane.
They bought you toy planes when you were a kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
And plus, and the plane that Roger asked me that who was in there, I said that was me as a pilot. And the reason I said that I want to be a pilot because I feel like at the time, if you like a plane or bird, you feel like you're free to fly to anywhere you wanted.
Right.
So that's why most of my drawing is airplanes.
Airplanes.
So again, thank you so much for having me tonight.
Thank you for being here tonight. Let's give him. I'd like to thank you all for coming this evening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.